Claire Whitmore had been in it a dozen times over the last 3 years. But today, something was different. The room felt colder, sharper, like it had been set for a kind of meeting she wasn't supposed to attend. "Close the door behind you," Walter Langford said without looking up. Claire did as told, the soft click of the heavy oak door louder than she expected. Walter was seated at the far end of the table, a stack of leather-bound folders in front of him. His gold cufflinks caught the morning light slanting through the tall windows. Beside him sat a man she didn't recognize. But she knew the type, perfectly pressed charcoal suit, no wedding ring. Clean-shaven jaw, the kind you usually saw in magazines next to headlines like Tech Titans to watch. The man looked at her like he already knew everything about her. "Claire," Walter said, finally meeting her eyes. "This is Graham Everhart, CEO of Everhart Innovations." Claire nodded, stepping forward slowly. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Everhart." His eyes didn't move. "Likewise." Walter gestured to the chair opposite them. "Have a seat. We have a sensitive matter to discuss." Claire sat, spine straight, heart ticking faster than it should. Graham didn't shift. He seemed carved from stone, save for his eyes, which stayed on her like a hawk watching a chessboard. "Your reputation precedes you," he said evenly. "I'm a junior associate," Claire replied, tone steady. "Not sure I have a reputation worth noting." Graham smiled faintly. "That's the best kind." Walter cleared his throat. "We're about to present you with an unusual opportunity. Discretion is key. If you walk out of here and say nothing, there are no consequences. But if you stay, really stay, you'll be involved in something personal for both parties." Claire looked between the two men. "This sounds more like a warning than a meeting." "It's both," Graham said. Walter opened one of the leather folders and pushed it toward her. Legal forms. Blank lines, bold terms. Claire didn't touch them. "Let me be blunt," Graham said, steepling his hands. "My investor visa is being revoked. I'm Canadian. I've been living in the US for 10 years, building the company. Due to recent changes in visa policy, I have 90 days to resolve my status or risk having to move Everhart Innovations and all its jobs back to Toronto." Claire blinked. "Can't your legal team resolve that?" "They've tried. Extensively. The only fast legal pathway that remains is marriage to a US citizen." She stared at him, then at Walter. "You're not serious." "We're very serious," Walter said softly. Graham's gaze didn't falter. "I'm proposing a legal marriage, 1 year. Clean separation afterward. No strings, no illusions. You'll be compensated, generously." Claire let the silence settle for a beat. Then, "You're asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking you to enter a contract," Graham replied. "One that includes marriage, yes." She almost laughed. "Almost. How much?" Walter didn't flinch. $7 million. Claire's mouth opened, then shut. "Tax-free," Graham added, "plus full ownership of a historic home in Savannah, currently under renovation. It'll be in your name." "What makes you think I'd even consider this?" "You're a brilliant lawyer," Graham said. "You've taken on more pro bono cases than any of your peers. You support your family on a junior salary. Your mother's home is 1 letter away from foreclosure. Your brother's pharmacy school tuition just ballooned." Claire's chest tightened. "You had me investigated?" "I did my research. I needed someone sharp. And clean." The insult wasn't in what he said. It was in how calm he was saying it. "I'm not for sale," she said quietly. "No," Graham said, "but you are practical." She looked down at the papers, then back up at him. "You could have chosen anyone. Why me? Because you understand contracts, Graham said, and because you've been invisible in your firm long enough that no one will ask the wrong questions, and because you don't scare easily. Claire stood slowly. I need time. You have 48 hours, Graham replied. Walter reached for the folder. Take it with you. Review the terms. Have someone you trust look it over. Claire stared at them both, then turned and walked out of the room. Her heels echoed through the corridor, louder with every step. Outside, Savannah bloomed with late spring. The azaleas were bright, the air thick. But Claire felt none of it. She reached the sidewalk, the weight of the folder in her bag like a stone. She didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or call someone and scream. Instead, she walked, past wrought iron fences, past couples on benches, past children eating ice cream in the square. The city moved gently around her, soft drawls and shaded porches and everything she'd grown up loving. And now this, a transaction dressed as a proposal. She didn't notice she'd walked all the way to the cemetery until she saw the gates. The stone arch. The oak trees bowed over the path like they were listening. She found the familiar headstone, sat on the cool grass beside it. Hey, Dad, she whispered. You'll never believe what just happened. A breeze stirred the moss above. I'm not saying yes, she said quickly, but I could pay off Mom's house, get Eli out of debt. Finally start that clinic downtown. She reached into her bag and pulled out the folder. Is it still wrong? She whispered. If it helps everyone I love? A bird called out from a tree nearby. Claire leaned back on her elbows, staring at the sky. In a quiet, emotionally sterile boardroom, a stranger had looked her in the eye and offered her everything she never knew how to ask for, but only if she agreed to live a lie for 1 year. The question wasn't whether she could say yes. It was whether she could survive what came after. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Claire stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above her bed, each rotation slicing through the silence like a metronome of indecision. The folder Graham Everhart had given her lay unopened on her nightstand, sealed like a secret too dangerous to touch. She hadn't told her mother. She hadn't told Tessa. She didn't know how. Outside her window, Savannah simmered in its usual spring haze, sultry, lush, slow-moving. Inside, Claire's thoughts raced in sharp, endless circles. She finally reached for her phone. Tessa answered on the second ring. If you're calling before sunrise, someone better be in labor or on fire. Claire exhaled a laugh, but her voice cracked. Neither. Can I come over? Of course, you okay? No. Not really. 20 minutes later, Claire stood on the porch of a 2-story craftsman on Bull Street. Tessa met her with a steaming mug of tea and an arched brow. You look like someone offered you $1 million to marry a stranger. Claire blinked. 7. Tessa froze. What? Claire walked in and sat on the couch. I'm not kidding. You're telling me a man, whom you just met, is offering you $7 million to marry him? 1 year? No strings, no romance, just a contract. Tessa sat slowly beside her. Okay, that's a lot. Who is he? Graham Everhart. Canadian tech guy. Visa issues. Needs a fast fix. And you're the fix? Claire nodded. Walter arranged it. I was chosen. Tessa was quiet for a long moment. Chosen? Like some kind of temporary Cinderella? Claire's laugh was dry, more like a well-compensated placeholder. Tessa leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Claire, You've worked your entire life to become a lawyer of integrity. This isn't just a loophole. It's your life they're trying to rewrite. I know, Claire said softly. But what if I could rewrite it too? Pay off Mom's house, get Eli through school, open the non-profit I've dreamed about since law school, and then walk away with your soul intact. Claire looked down into her tea. That's what I don't know. The doorbell rang. Claire's head snapped up. Tessa looked toward the hallway. That better not be. I didn't tell him where you live, Claire said, alarmed. But Tessa was already walking to the door. Claire heard voices. A pause. Then Tessa called, "It's for you." Claire stood slowly. When she reached the doorway, Graham Everhart stood on the porch, perfectly out of place against the chipped white railing and hanging fern basket. He wore no tie today, just a crisp dress shirt and dark slacks, sleeves rolled neatly. He held a brown paper bag in one hand. "I'm sorry to intrude," he said calmly. "May I speak with you?" Tessa crossed her arms. "You're standing on holy ground here, Mr. Everhart. I won't take long," he said. Claire stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her. Graham handed her the bag, cinnamon buns, from LeBlanc's. "You mentioned in passing once you liked them." She looked at the bag. "I didn't mention anything." He met her gaze. "Your bio on the firm's site. It says your favorite local tradition is Sunday buns from LeBlanc's. I did my homework." Claire opened the bag. The smell was warm and sweet, and oddly personal. "You don't need to bribe me," she said. "I'm not," he replied. "But I wanted to speak, without the office walls." She motioned to the porch swing. "Fine, talk." He sat beside her, careful not to let their shoulders touch. "I know what this sounds like," he began. "I've read the headlines before, marriages of convenience, quick fixes. They don't exactly end in fairy tales." Claire kept her gaze on the Spanish moss swaying in the distance. "I didn't come to Savannah looking for a wife," Graham continued. "I came to build something stable. Sustainable. My last few years have been complicated." "Your wife?" Claire asked before she could stop herself. He nodded. "I lost her 4 years ago, cancer. I never remarried, never really tried to date again, but I've worked every day since. Built a company, built plans, and now they're falling apart," Claire said. His jaw tensed. "Yes, this isn't about manipulating the system. It's about saving something I've spent a decade pouring my life into. And I can't do that unless I stay here." He turned to her. "I don't need a partner. I need an ally. Someone smart, private, steady." "That's you." Claire looked away. "And you get to go back to business while I play house. I don't expect you to pretend anything more than what we agree to. You'll have your independence. Your own space, no physical expectations, just public unity." "You make it sound so romantic," she muttered. He actually smiled. "That's the point. It's not." A beat of silence stretched between them. Then Graham added, "You don't have to say yes, but if you do, everything changes for both of us. On paper. And behind it." Claire closed her eyes for a moment, hearing her father's voice from years ago. "There's more than one kind of love, baby girl. Some are loud, others show up quietly and never leave." She opened her eyes. 1 year? Yes. 7 million? Yes. I stay at the firm. I control my workload. "No manipulation." He nodded. "All terms are negotiable." "And the house?" "It's yours. No strings." Claire exhaled slowly. "And after 1 year?" We part ways, quietly, legally. She looked at him. Really looked. And if someone asks what brought us together? Graham leaned back. His voice was low, almost vulnerable. Tell them I looked at you and said, "You'll be my wife," not out of love, but because it had to last. Claire blinked. That's not exactly a vow. It's not the end of one either. They sat in silence again, the porch swing swaying gently, the cinnamon buns cooling between them. Claire's hands trembled as she took one from the bag. She bit into it slowly, then looked at him. 48 hours? 40, Graham said, standing. Now. He left without waiting for another word. Claire sat on the porch for a long time after that, the early morning sun warming her skin, her thoughts caught somewhere between panic and something dangerously close to hope. Claire stood at the edge of Lafayette Square, the sun heavy on her skin and the folder heavier still in her hands. Spanish moss stirred in the breeze, curling like grey ribbons above her head. Children laughed near the fountain, their shrieks echoing off the cobblestones. The world didn't stop moving, not for life, not for death, and certainly not for decisions that felt too big for one person to make alone. She opened the folder. Her eyes scanned each line. Terms, conditions, signatures. A contract that looked like any other, until you realized it didn't promise money or land or business equity. It promised a life, sort of. She turned the last page, then the last, until she reached a handwritten note tucked inside. Claire, this is just paper. What matters is what we make of it. If you walk away, I'll understand, but if you stay, we'll write the rest together. G.E. Her breath caught, not because of what the note said, but because he'd bothered to write it. She pulled out her phone. Walter Langford, came the familiar voice. I'll do it, Claire said. Her own voice sounded foreign to her, firm, certain, steady. He exhaled into the line. I was hoping you'd say that. I have my own terms. They'll be added to the contract. Of course. And I want the ceremony simple. Legal, private. That's already in motion. She paused. He already assumed I'd say yes? Walter chuckled. Graham Everhart doesn't assume. He prepares. Claire hung up before she could say something she'd regret. 3 hours later, she stood in the conference room again, but now across from Graham, dressed in a navy blue suit that managed to look effortless and intentional at the same time. His shirt sleeves were rolled again. He seemed to favor that. Miss Whitmore, he said as she entered, standing from his chair. Mr. Everhart? She didn't smile. May I? He gestured toward the folder in her hands. She held it to her chest. I added my terms. I read them, he replied. I signed them. Claire arched an eyebrow. You want independence. I respect that. You'll keep your job, retain access to your own bank account, and live in a separate wing of the house. I won't interfere with your legal work. In return, you'll attend public functions as my wife and appear convincingly invested in this marriage. Convincingly? He stepped closer, just enough to lower his voice. We're not conning the public. We're conning paperwork. That means chemistry, eye contact. The occasional hand on a shoulder. You think you can manage that? She met his gaze head on. I can act. Good. A flicker of something. Approval. Amusement passed across his face. The wedding is Saturday. Judge Ellis is officiating. Claire blinked. This Saturday? He nodded. Everything's arranged. You move fast. I don't like loose ends. She set the folder on the table. And after the wedding? You'll move into the home on Calhoun Street. She hesitated. Our home? For appearances, yes, but you'll have full autonomy. He turned and walked to the window. "Claire, I know this isn't what you dreamed of." "No," she said, her voice flat. "Not even close." He looked out over the city. "My mother used to say marriages don't start with love. They start with two people who decide not to walk away." Claire crossed her arms. "Sounds romantic." "It wasn't meant to be." He turned back to her. "It was meant to be true." She held his gaze longer this time. He didn't look away. Neither did she. Something in her shifted. Not trust. Not yet, but something adjacent to curiosity. Something that whispered, "Watch him closely." Saturday arrived like a scene in a film. Too bright, too warm, too perfect. Claire stood in front of the mirror in the small room Judge Ellis had offered behind the courthouse. Her dress was simple. Ivory silk, no lace, no frills. Elegant, clean. She'd chosen it because it didn't pretend. Tessa adjusted the straps on her shoulders, her mouth pulled tight. "I still think this is crazy." "I know. But you look... God, Claire. You look stunning." Claire forced a smile. "Stunning doesn't mean smart." Tessa handed her a tissue. "Then maybe you can be both." A knock at the door made them both freeze. "5 minutes," came Judge Ellis's voice. Claire turned toward the mirror one last time. Her reflection looked calm, but her hands trembled as she gathered her bouquet. White lilies, simple ribbon, no embellishment. She stepped into the hallway. The ceremony was held under the portico behind the courthouse. Just her, Graham, Judge Ellis, and Walter Langford. The air smelled like jasmine and stone. Graham stood at the end of the path, dressed in gray this time, his expression unreadable. Still, controlled. But when she stepped toward him, something flickered in his eyes. He didn't smile, but he did look real. Claire joined him at the front. No music, no guests, just quiet. "Do you have vows?" Judge Ellis asked. "We've agreed to standard civil language," Graham replied. Claire nodded. The judge began. "Do you, Graham Thomas Everhart, take Claire Elaine Whitmore to be your lawfully wedded wife, to respect and uphold your commitment for the duration agreed upon by contract and conscience?" "I do," he said, without hesitation. "And do you, Claire Elaine Whitmore, take Graham Thomas Everhart to be your lawfully wedded husband, under the terms of your shared agreement, bound by law and trust?" Claire's breath caught. Then she looked up and answered, steady as stone. "I do." "You may exchange rings," Judge Ellis said. Graham reached into his pocket and pulled out a thin platinum band. He slid it onto her finger with an almost reverent touch. Claire blinked back something too warm to name and slipped his matching ring on, her fingers brushing his for just a second longer than required. "By the power vested in me by the state of Georgia," Judge Ellis said, "and the authority of your mutual consent, I pronounce you husband and wife." The silence after was louder than the words themselves. They didn't kiss. There was no applause, just the distant sound of wind rustling through oak branches, and the way Graham finally looked at her, not like a CEO sealing a deal, but like a man watching a door close quietly behind him and wondering what he'd just locked himself into. Claire stepped away first. Graham followed. And somewhere between their footsteps and the signing of documents, a strange stillness fell over them both. Not regret. Not yet, but something else. Something that would stay. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way. The Everhart house on Calhoun Street looked like it had been plucked from the cover of a Southern Living magazine. Grand columns, whitewashed shutters, wraparound porch hugged by climbing ivy. But as Claire stepped inside for the first time as Mrs. Everhart, it didn't feel like a home. It felt like a performance space. A butler she hadn't met yet, a quiet man with kind eyes, nodded at her arrival and took her overnight bag without a word. She hadn't packed much, just enough to keep up appearances. Graham stood in the front foyer, hands in his pockets, watching her take it in. His voice was neutral. "I trust the ceremony met your expectations." Claire didn't look at him. "It wasn't a party. That's what I asked for." He walked past her into the parlor, the air around him carrying faint traces of sandalwood. "You'll be in the south wing. It has its own entrance, your own study, and a private balcony. I've made sure the kitchen is stocked with the coffee you like." She turned then. "You really do your research. I don't like leaving things to chance." Her eyes narrowed. "People aren't spreadsheets, Graham." "No," he said. "They're far more complicated." Before she could answer, footsteps echoed down the hall. A woman, mid-60s, salt and pepper bun, pressed navy blouse, appeared, holding a linen cloth and a tray with 2 crystal flutes. "You must be Claire," she said, voice as warm as fresh biscuits. "I'm Annie. I keep this place running." "Or try to." Claire smiled, grateful for something real. "It's lovely to meet you." "This is Rick," Annie added, as her husband stepped in behind her with a rolling suitcase. "He doesn't talk much, but he fixes everything. Especially the things we forget we broke." Rick grinned and tipped his head in greeting. Claire shook both their hands. "Thank you for welcoming me." "We've been through a few arrangements," Annie said, carefully placing the tray on a marble table. "But something tells me this one's different." Claire caught Graham's gaze. He looked away first. "Please let us know if you need anything," Annie said, then lowered her voice just enough. "Including a quiet place to scream if the day gets too long." That earned Claire's first real laugh. Duly noted. As Annie and Rick left, Claire turned to Graham. "How many arrangements have you had?" He didn't flinch. "None like this." They stood in silence. Claire stepped toward the tray. The champagne sparkled under the chandelier light. "I suppose we toast?" she asked. "If we must." He poured, handed her a glass. Their fingers brushed. She felt it, only briefly, but it stayed longer than she liked. Claire raised her glass. "To contracts." Graham's mouth curved, something that almost resembled a smirk. "To consequences." They clinked glasses. She took a long sip, let the bubbles bite her tongue, then excused herself and climbed the winding staircase to her new wing. Her room was everything it should be, refined, peaceful, expensive. A queen bed sat beneath tall windows, cream linens, a vase of lilies on the dresser. The closet was already filled with clothing in her size. She sat on the edge of the bed, letting the silence wrap around her. This was real, legal, official. She was married to a stranger. Her phone buzzed. "Tessa, you okay? Alive? Mentally stable?" Claire smiled. Type back. Define stable. A minute later, another ping. "Tessa, call me if you need to fake your own death. I have a cousin in Jacksonville with a boat." Claire laughed softly. The first honest sound she'd made all day. That night, dinner was served in the dining room, but not shared. Graham was already seated at one end when she arrived, his plate half finished, his phone to the side. Claire sat at the opposite end. Annie had prepared lemon herb chicken and roasted vegetables. Claire took a bite. It was perfect. "You don't have to eat here," Graham said, glancing up. Claire chewed, swallowed. "Do you?" "I usually don't." "Then why now?" He didn't answer. She set her fork down. "You said this wouldn't interfere with my life." He leaned back in his chair. It won't. But this isn't normal. We're pretending, remember? His voice was low. Do you want to pretend badly or convincingly? Claire froze. Before she could respond, the sound of heels clicked against tile. A tall woman entered the room. Crimson lips, sleek black dress, and an expression Claire immediately recognized, polite judgment wrapped in southern grace. "Well," the woman said with a smile too white to be warm, "you must be the bride." Claire stood instinctively. "I'm sorry. And you are?" "Delilah Knox," she said, gliding forward. "Old friend of Graham's." "We go back. Well, back far enough." Graham's jaw tightened. "Delilah. I heard about the ceremony," Delilah continued, turning toward him. "Minimalist. Very on brand. Not your usual taste, but I suppose things change." Claire kept her voice even. "Did you drop by for dinner?" "Oh, no, darling," Delilah said sweetly. "Just returning something Graham left at my place, but I couldn't resist saying hello." She placed a manila envelope on the table beside him. "Old documents." Nothing thrilling. Claire's stomach twisted, not because she believed Delilah, but because she didn't know whether she wanted to. Graham didn't reach for the envelope. "Thanks." Delilah turned back to Claire. "You're very pretty." "Different than what I imagined, but lovely," Claire smiled. "And you're exactly what I imagined." Delilah's lips parted just slightly. Claire stepped forward. "Thanks for stopping by, but we have a lot of pretending to do." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Delilah laughed. "Touché, I like her." She turned, breeze in her wake, and was gone. Claire sat down slowly. Graham didn't look up. "You didn't have to do that." She walked into our home uninvited. He finally met her eyes. "You called it our home." Claire blinked, then rose without another word and left the room. The echo of her own words following her up the stairs, like footsteps she hadn't meant to leave behind. Claire wasn't sure what woke her. Maybe it was the quiet hum of Savannah outside the tall windows, or the way moonlight slanted through the gauzy curtains, painting long silver lines across the wooden floor. But something stirred in her. Restless. Alert. She slipped from bed and padded to the balcony barefoot, the floor cool under her feet. From there, she could see the garden below, hedges carved into precise shapes, roses blooming in neat, self-contained clusters. It was too perfect. Like everything in this house. Too curated to be lived in. She wrapped her arms around herself and leaned on the railing. A warm breeze lifted her hair as a soft sound drifted up. A piano. Low. Subtle. Familiar. Claire narrowed her eyes and followed the sound, stepping back inside and down the hallway, barefoot still, careful on the stairs so they wouldn't creak. The music grew louder as she reached the back of the house. The notes were simple, not polished. Someone feeling their way through the keys rather than performing. She turned the corner. Graham sat at the baby grand in the sunroom, half in shadow, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He didn't see her. His fingers moved slowly, hesitantly, as if unsure whether they deserved to play at all. Claire leaned against the doorframe. "I didn't know you played." He didn't stop, but his voice reached her calmly. "I don't. Not well. It doesn't sound like someone faking it. I took lessons. Years ago. My wife loved music. I stopped playing when she got sick. Couldn't stand how much space the silence left behind." Claire stepped closer, the soft rug muffling her footsteps. "So why now?" Graham lifted his hands from the keys. "You said something yesterday about pretending. Made me realize how long I've been doing it." He looked up at her, eyes dark but open. I've lived in boardrooms, airports, hotel suites, built everything from nothing. But this house, this life, I don't know how to be inside it. Claire sat on the edge of the settee beside him. The music lingered in the air like a scent, like memory. She hesitated. You don't have to explain anything to me. Maybe not. But I don't want you to think I brought you into a lie and then left you alone in it. Her voice was soft. That's exactly what you did. Graham looked down at the keys again. Fair. A long pause stretched between them, and for a moment, Claire thought he might say something else. Instead, he played a final soft chord, then closed the lid over the keys. I'll be traveling next week, he said. Investor meeting in Boston. She stood, folding her arms. Will I be expected to go? No, but there's a gala the following Saturday, fundraiser for Savannah Youth Initiative. You'll need to attend. With me? So you'll disappear for 4 days, then return for a photo op. It's part of the deal. Claire didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. When you picked me, did you ever think about what it might do to me? To my name? To my work? Yes, Graham said quietly. I also thought about what it might do for you. She turned to him. That doesn't make it noble. He met her gaze, and for the first time, there was no defense in his eyes. No, it doesn't. The next morning, Claire returned to the law firm. She stepped into the building just past 8, dressed in a cream blouse and navy slacks, heels quiet on the marble floor. Heads turned as she walked through reception. It wasn't loud, but it was felt. Whispers, curious glances. One partner nodded stiffly. Another didn't meet her eyes at all. She entered her office and closed the door before the weight of it all could settle on her chest. Claire set her bag down, powered on her monitor, and sat still. Her name was already different in the system. Claire Everhart. Just like that. A knock. Come in. Walter stepped inside, a coffee in each hand. Peace offering? She took the mug. What are you apologizing for? Everything I didn't say when I should have. She sipped. Well, that's a long list. Walter pulled a chair up and leaned in. Claire, I know how this looks. To the world. Maybe even to you. You mean unethical? Shady? Completely out of character? I mean strategic. She narrowed her eyes. Whose strategy? Yours? If you let it be. Claire leaned back. I'm not here to climb the ladder, Walter. I'm here to do the work. I know. That's why Graham wanted you. You're principled, clean. She blinked. Wanted me? Not in the way you think, Walter said quickly. He wanted someone who wouldn't blur the lines, someone who wouldn't fall in love. Claire set her mug down harder than she meant to. I should get back to billing hours, she said coldly. Walter stood. You're not here by mistake, Claire. Just make sure you're writing your own story inside this arrangement. He left. Claire stared at the door after he closed it, pulse louder than her thoughts. That evening she found a small package on her bed. No note. Inside, an embossed invitation to the Savannah Youth Initiative Gala and a black velvet box. She opened it slowly. Inside lay a pair of pearl drop earrings, understated and elegant, not loud, not showy. Just classic. She turned them over in her palm, waiting for her chest to tighten, but instead, something else bloomed there. Not romance, not even gratitude, just awareness. She was beginning to understand Graham Everhart, not as a man in control, but as a man quietly holding everything together with threadbare grace. And maybe, just maybe, that was more dangerous than love, because it made her want to see what might happen if she stopped pretending too. Claire stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest room she now called hers. slipping the pearl drop earrings into place. The gown she wore clung in all the right places, black, sleek, and silent. The kind of dress designed not to shout, but to be remembered. It was her second week as Mrs. Everhart. Still no wedding photos. No romantic dinners, no late-night laughter. Just shared schedules, short exchanges, and the growing realization that beneath Graham's cold polish was a man unraveling, thread by elegant thread. A knock at the door, not rushed, not hesitant. Just measured. "Come in." Graham stepped inside in a tuxedo that looked like it was tailored by someone who knew his secrets. His tie was already knotted. His cufflinks glinted gold in the soft light. But it was the way he looked at her, still silent, without any smirk or compliment, that made her fingers go cold. "Is it too much?" she asked, glancing down. "No," he said. "It's perfect." Claire reached for her clutch on the dresser. "Then let's get it over with." They didn't speak much on the way to the gala. His driver maneuvered through the winding streets of the historic district, while Claire watched the lamplight spill across cobblestones outside. Inside the car, silence hovered between them like another passenger. At the venue, an old renovated bank with gold-trimmed doors and chandeliers that dripped elegance. Flashes of camera bulbs greeted them the moment they stepped onto the sidewalk. Claire instinctively slipped her hand into the crook of Graham's arm. He didn't flinch. They moved as one toward the entrance. Inside, everything shimmered. Crystal glasses, live jazz, and the hum of old money congratulating itself. Claire recognized donors from the firm's holiday gala. A judge from the courthouse. Even her mother's former neighbor, now a downtown socialite. Graham leaned in, his voice brushing her ear. "We stay for 90 minutes. Smile, speak when spoken to, dance if they ask. Then we leave." She tilted her head slightly. "You say that like it's war strategy." "It is," he murmured. They stepped into the crowd. For the first 30 minutes, Claire played the part flawlessly. Gracious, curious, quietly magnetic. She asked questions about foundations and family grants. She nodded at praise. She held her glass like it was an accessory, not a comfort. Graham, ever the controlled counterpart, introduced her with an even tone. "My wife, Claire." Just that. No added warmth. No private jokes. But it was enough to turn heads. "You're not what I expected," one woman told her, eyebrows raised like punctuation marks. Claire smiled. "I get that a lot." Midway through a conversation about school board politics, Claire felt a chill Delilah. She was across the room in a dark emerald gown that hugged her every curve, smiling like she was in on a secret no one else knew. Her gaze found Claire, then drifted to Graham, then back again. Claire braced herself. Delilah approached like smoke, unseen until it was all around you. "Claire," she cooed, brushing her hand lightly against her arm. "You look exquisite." "Doesn't she look exquisite, Graham?" Graham's expression didn't shift. "She does." Delilah's eyes glittered. "I remember when he used to bring me to these events. He always hated them, but he showed up anyway." Claire smiled tightly. "And yet here he is, with me." Delilah laughed softly. "Yes, so many changes in such a short time." Claire stepped forward. "You know, Delilah, it's funny. I keep hearing stories about your history with my husband, but none of them have happy endings." Delilah's mouth parted for a beat. Claire leaned in, her voice silk. "Let me know if you ever want to talk about what you're still trying to rewrite." Then she turned and walked away, glass in hand, heart thudding in her throat. She found a quiet corner near the back wall, beneath an arched window. The air felt lighter here, like the party didn't know how to reach her. She sipped her champagne, exhaling slowly. "You didn't have to do that." She turned. Graham stood behind her, not angry, not amused, just watching. "She was circling like a hawk," Claire said. "I gave her something sharp to choke on." He almost smiled, almost. "You handled it well." Claire looked away. "This whole thing's a performance. I figured I might as well earn the applause." Graham took a step closer. "That wasn't just performance." "No," she admitted. "It wasn't." He looked at her then, really looked. And for the first time since this began, she saw it. The hesitation. The quiet need to say more. But he didn't. Instead, he reached out his hand. "Dance with me." She blinked. "You hate dancing." "So do you." She hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. The music slowed, a classic melody, low and heavy with longing. He held her, not too close, but not as distant as she expected. His hand was warm at the small of her back, her breath caught when their eyes met. They moved together easily, unexpectedly. Her body remembered how to follow without needing to think. "Do you miss her?" Claire asked softly. Graham's steps slowed. Every day. She must have been incredible. She was. His voice was quiet, but different. "She gave me peace. You give me fire." Claire's pulse jumped. He looked down at her. "And I'm starting to think I need both." The music carried them through one final turn. Then applause. But Claire didn't notice the sound. Not really. All she could feel was his hand still at her back, and the ache blooming in her chest. Not fear. Not regret. Longing. And the terrible, beautiful sense that something real had just begun, inside something they both promised would never be. Claire didn't sleep that night. The music from the gala echoed through her bones, even hours after the last champagne glass had been cleared. She'd peeled off the dress slowly, like removing skin she wasn't ready to shed. The pearl drop earring still sat on her nightstand, quiet witnesses to a night she hadn't expected to matter. But it did. That dance, those words. "You give me fire." She lay awake beneath the linen sheets, staring at the carved ceiling, trying to decipher whether Graham's voice had cracked when he said it, or if hers had only wanted it to. By morning, the ache in her chest had become something else, something sharper. She stepped onto the balcony with her coffee, watching Savannah stir below. Streetcars clanged in the distance. Someone watered a garden. And inside her, a truth kept blooming. She was no longer a placeholder, not to the city, not to the world, maybe not even to Graham. Later that afternoon, Claire sat at her desk in the law office, staring at a client file, but hearing none of the words. She tapped her pen against the folder. Her thoughts kept circling back to the way Graham had looked at her under those chandeliers, like she wasn't just part of the contract anymore. Her phone buzzed. "Tessa. Lunch." "Now, no excuses. You owe me tea and every detail from last night." Claire smiled despite herself. She sent a one-word reply. "Coming." The cafe on Broughton Street was half full, buzzing with midday energy. Claire spotted Tessa in a corner booth, iced tea already in hand, sunglasses perched on top of her head like a crown. "Okay," Tessa said before Claire could even sit. "You look like an Oscar-winning actress. And don't tell me you didn't notice the way Graham looked at you like he forgot the world existed." Claire sat. "I didn't come here for commentary." "You came here for honesty," Tessa corrected. "And I'm giving it to you," Claire stirred her drink, her voice low. I don't know what's happening. It was supposed to be a business deal. Now, it feels like something else is bleeding in. Feelings? Claire shook her head. Not yet. But maybe the space where feelings could live. Tessa leaned in. You're afraid? Yes. Of him? No, Claire said quietly. Of me. Tessa let that hang in the air for a moment. Then she reached across the table. Claire, just because it didn't start with love doesn't mean it can't end in something close. Claire looked up. But what if I fall for him, and he still sees me as the solution, not the choice? Then you walk away knowing you were real, and he missed it. The truth hit harder than Claire wanted it to. She nodded and changed the subject. That night, the house on Calhoun was quiet. Annie had taken the evening off. The lights were dim. The smell of lemon polish lingered in the air like memory. Claire found Graham in the library, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled. A glass of scotch sat untouched beside him. Papers lay scattered across the desk. She leaned against the doorway. Hard day? He looked up. Hard decade. Claire walked in slowly. You seem off. He closed a file. A board member is threatening to pull funding if I don't move operations overseas. Her heart sank. That would destroy half your Savannah staff. I know. And the visa? He hesitated. It would remain intact. But the cost... He didn't finish the sentence. Claire sat in the chair across from him. You didn't bring me into this to watch it all fall apart. No, he said. I brought you in to keep it standing. She softened. Then let me help. He studied her. How? I know people on the city council. If we can build a local impact proposal, tie it to the school districts, to youth employment, we might gain leverage. Make it impossible for the board to move anything without looking like villains. He stared at her like she'd spoken a language he hadn't heard in years. You don't have to fix this, he said gently. But I want to, Claire replied. Because whether or not you chose me for love, I'm here now. I don't do anything halfway. Graham's voice dipped. Neither do I. The silence between them shifted, warmed, deepened. Then he stood and crossed to her. Slowly. Claire, he said, voice low. What are we doing? I don't know, she whispered. But I'm not pretending anymore. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His touch was light, careful. But she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into it, and in that fragile moment, surrounded by old books, closed contracts, and half-drunk scotch, they stood on the edge of something neither of them had dared write into the terms. Something that didn't come with guarantees, only the terrifying possibility that it might be real. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows of the library, casting golden light across the same spot where Claire and Graham had stood hours before, breath mingling in that small, uncertain space between closeness and confession. But they hadn't crossed the line. Claire had stepped back, heart pounding, and simply said, "Let's not ruin this by rushing." Graham had nodded, the quiet in his eyes louder than any plea. Now she sat at the kitchen island in a soft robe, hair twisted in a low bun, staring at the screen of her laptop. A spreadsheet filled with employment statistics and neighborhood impact summaries blinked back at her. She took a slow sip of coffee, then typed another note into the margin. Working on our salvation already? Graham's voice slid into the room, smooth and just rough enough to feel real. She looked up. He wore no jacket today, just a button-down shirt with the top undone, and he carried 2 plates, toast, eggs, and a little bowl of cut fruit balanced perfectly. Claire blinked. Did you cook? I assembled, he corrected, placing one plate in front of her. Don't ask me to poach anything. She smirked, pulling the plate closer. Noted. He leaned against the opposite counter, watching her without the usual mask. You're different in the morning. Claire raised an eyebrow. More honest or more dangerous? Both. They ate in a comfortable hush, the only sound the clink of forks and the occasional passing car outside. Then Claire slid her laptop over to him. These are the numbers we need to present. Impact on local jobs, projected tax revenue, educational investments. If we can position it right, we force the board to consider more than just profit margins. Graham's brow lifted as he read. You really are brilliant. I'm really committed, she corrected. There's a difference. His voice dropped. That's what scares me. She stared at him. Why? Because if this becomes more than a transaction, I won't know how to protect either of us. Before Claire could respond, the front door echoed through the hallway, footsteps, a knock on the archway. Annie appeared with a polite smile. Miss Claire? You've got company? Claire frowned. Who? But Tessa was already stepping into the room, sunglasses tucked into her purse, hair swept up, confidence humming from her every move. Morning, she said, eyeing Graham. Hope I'm not interrupting anything inspiring. Claire stood. Tessa, I come bearing gifts. Tessa held up a thick envelope. The city's proposed development plan for the riverfront. Got it from a friend in zoning. It might just give you the leverage you need. Claire took it, flipping through the first few pages, eyes widening. This could be everything. I thought so, Tessa said, turning to Graham. You're welcome. He nodded. Thank you. She crossed her arms. Just don't break her. Tessa, Claire warned gently. But her best friend wasn't finished. You may have signed a contract, but she's still flesh and heart underneath it. Don't forget that. Graham held her gaze. I haven't. Tessa exhaled and looked back to Claire. Call me later. Then she left, leaving the room suddenly quieter than before. Claire set the envelope down. Sorry, she's fiercely loyal. I respect that, Graham said. Claire turned to him. Do you mean it? About not forgetting? His expression didn't shift. Claire, I haven't stopped thinking about what happens when the year ends. She drew in a breath. What have you thought? That maybe we don't need to rush toward an exit, that maybe we write the rules as we go. Claire took a step toward him, her voice low. Do you want that? I don't know what I want, he admitted, but I know I want it with you. Her heart cracked open in that moment, not wide, not loudly, but with the soft ache of truth finally settling into its place. She moved closer, slowly. Then start here, with me, not with what's been written, with what's still unwritten. He reached for her hand, fingers closing gently around hers. Just then, Rick walked by with a quiet nod, pretending not to notice how still the kitchen had gone, how something sacred had just taken shape in silence. Claire glanced down at their hands. There's still a lot we haven't said. Then let's not say it all today, Graham replied. Let's earn it. And for the first time since this all began, Claire realized something terrifying and true. She wasn't counting days anymore. She was beginning to live them. Claire stood alone in the city council chamber, watching sunlight pour in through the high stained glass windows. The room was still, too still, except for the echo of her heels against the tiled floor as she walked toward the podium. She'd been in this room dozens of times, as a lawyer, an advocate, a silent observer. But today was different. Today she wasn't just here for a cause. She was here for him. For them. A sharp inhale, steadying breath. Behind her, chairs filled slowly. City officials murmured to one another. Reporters filed into the back, cameras poised. The Savannah Gazette would be watching this vote closely, and Claire knew it. Graham had offered to come, but she told him no. If you show up, it'll look like pressure. If I show up alone, it looks like belief. Now she wasn't sure if she regretted that choice. The council chair banged the gavel. Ms. Whitmore, Everhart, you're up. Claire moved to the center of the room, adjusted the microphone. Every pair of eyes locked on her. She didn't flinch. Good afternoon, she began. Today, I'm not speaking as a lawyer. I'm speaking as someone who believes in this city. She paused, letting the words breathe. We are not here to protect legacy profits or corporate comfort zones. We're here to protect livelihoods, futures, families. You've all seen the numbers. If Everhart International moves its logistics division overseas, we're not just losing jobs. We're cutting ties with every local scholarship that program supports. Every community kitchen it donates to. Every young intern it trains and pays fairly. Her voice held steady, but her heart pounded. We have a chance to do more than rubber stamp what's easiest. We can renegotiate, reinvest. We can choose to be the city that doesn't sell out what's sacred for what's simple. Silence. She closed her folder. I respectfully urge this council to support the reinvestment incentive and block the overseas move until all local avenues have been exhausted. As she stepped back, she locked eyes with Councilman Reyes. He gave her the slightest nod. A ripple of murmurs followed. The chair announced a recess before the vote. Claire sat back in the front row, her hands cold despite the heat in the room. 10 minutes passed. 20, and then Judge Ellis walked in. Claire's eyes widened in surprise as he made his way toward her. Didn't think I'd miss this, did you? He said, sitting beside her. You still read the docket? I still believe in certain people. She smiled. That means more than you know. The gavel sounded again. The council reassembled. All in favor of delaying international expansion and supporting local reinvestment initiatives. Hands rose, one by one. Claire counted them, barely breathing. Majority. Motion passed. She didn't react right away, just sat there, still, as the wave of relief broke quietly inside her chest. Then she stood and exited the chamber, letting the door close softly behind her before she pulled out her phone. She called him. It passed, she said, before he could even speak. On the other end, silence. Then, you did it. We did. No, Graham said softly. You saved it. Claire walked down the courthouse steps, past the moss-draped oaks and the distant toll of church bells. Her heels clicked with more certainty than they had walking in. She was almost to her car when she saw him. Graham stood leaning against it, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled, tie loose. Like he'd been waiting just long enough to feel foolish, but not long enough to leave. Claire stopped. You said not to come, he said simply. I did. I couldn't stay away. She didn't speak. I stood in that boardroom yesterday, Graham said, voice low. And I realized I've spent so much time trying to protect the structure, I forgot why I built it in the first place. It wasn't for profit. It was for people. For legacy. And somehow you reminded me of that. Claire stepped closer. You're not the man I thought you were. His eyes didn't leave hers. And what do you think now? That maybe the version you hide is the one worth seeing. He reached for her hand, brushing her fingers with his. "I know what this started as," he said, "but it's not that anymore." "Not for me." Claire's throat tightened. "It's not for me either." The street noise faded behind them. The late afternoon sun pressed warm against their shoulders. Neither of them moved, until Graham said, almost afraid to break the moment, "Come home with me." Claire blinked. "I live with you." "No," he said. "Come home with me." It wasn't about the house, or the rooms, or even the name. It was about the choice. This time there wasn't a contract. Just her heart answering before her mind had time to interrupt. "Yes," she said, and in that small space between endings and beginnings, Claire knew one thing for certain. Something real had taken root. Not out of love, not yet. But maybe something that would outlast it. The rain started just after midnight. Not a storm, not a warning. Just a quiet, steady rhythm against the tall windows of the Everhart house. The kind of rain that softened the edges of the world. The kind of rain that made it easier to say things that usually stayed tucked beneath layers of silence. Claire sat at the window seat in the library, curled beneath a blanket, watching the streetlights blur through the glass. A candle flickered nearby, its flame swaying with the breath of the room. Her laptop was open but forgotten. Tonight, numbers could wait. Tonight was about something else. She heard the creak of the floorboard first, then the soft press of footsteps. Graham. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, hands in his pockets, like he was waiting to be invited into the quiet. Claire didn't turn. Couldn't sleep? He moved closer. Didn't try. She glanced up. "Are you okay?" He looked at her, really looked, and she could see it. The weight behind his eyes, the residue of pressure, the aftermath of pretending for too long. "I don't know how to be this version of myself," he said, voice barely above the rain. "The one who lets someone in." Claire shifted, giving him space on the cushion beside her. He sat slowly, the blanket between them, their shoulders almost touching. She waited. He exhaled. "My first marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real. Genuine. We built it piece by piece. No arrangements. No contracts, just two people trying." Claire's gaze dropped. "Do you feel guilty? That this is different?" "I think I felt guilty for needing something safe, something with structure, and when I asked you, I thought I was protecting both of us." Her voice was quiet. "But it wasn't protection, it was distance." "Yes," he paused, "but it's not what I want anymore." Claire finally looked at him. Graham's voice dropped. "You're not part of the plan. You're the interruption I didn't know I needed." Her throat tightened. "What are we doing, Graham?" He swallowed. "Something dangerous." She tilted her head. "Why dangerous?" "Because the closer I get to you, the more I realize I don't want the end of the contract to mean the end of us." Claire's pulse jumped. "I don't know how to offer love," he said, voice raw. "But I know how to offer choice, and I'm choosing you." She reached out, her fingers brushing his. "Then show me, not with words, with time." He closed his hand over hers, and for a while they sat in silence, letting the storm outside mimic the one stirring inside their hearts. The next morning brought more than sun. It brought mail. An envelope on the marble kitchen island, thick and cream-colored. Claire didn't recognize the handwriting. She opened it while waiting for coffee to brew. Inside was a card. "Elegant, formal. You are cordially invited to the Legacy Foundation's Fall Benefit Gala, hosted by Delilah Knox." Claire's stomach turned. At the bottom, written in looping script, "Graham, I thought it only fitting that you bring your beautiful new wife. I look forward to catching up. Properly this time." Claire dropped the card on the counter like it had burned her. Graham walked in, still in sweats, hair damp from a shower. He paused at the sight of the envelope. "She's not subtle," he said. Claire folded her arms. "You think she's planning something?" "She's always planning something." Claire picked up the invitation again. "Do you want to go?" Graham met her eyes. "No." "But we should." He nodded once. Claire exhaled. "Then I'll be ready." That night, she called Tessa. "She's testing you," Tessa said flatly. "And she's using a gala to do it because she thinks you still don't know who you are in that world." Claire paced the bedroom, phone pressed to her ear. "I'm not sure I do either." "You're not there to outshine her," Tessa added. "You're there to remind her you're not playing her game." "You are the game." Claire stopped. "That sounds terrifying." Tessa laughed. "It should. That's how you know it matters." By Friday, everything was in motion again. Claire had a dress fitted, black silk. No frills, just impact. Graham confirmed their RSVP. Annie arranged a car. Rick adjusted the house lights like they were prepping for a stage performance. But through it all, Claire noticed something shifting. Graham lingered longer at breakfast. He asked questions he didn't need to. He poured her coffee without her asking. Small things. Real things. And every time, Claire wondered if the thread tying them together had quietly turned into something far more delicate and far more permanent than either of them had planned. As she stepped into the foyer that evening, dressed and ready, Graham stood waiting in a tuxedo again, his eyes meeting hers with no practiced smile, just awe. "You look," he started, then stopped. Claire stepped toward him. "What?" "Unavoidable." She laughed once, lightly, then reached for his hand. "Let's go crash her party." And just like that, they walked out into the night, not as a contract, but as a possibility. The Legacy Foundation Gala glowed like something out of a dream. The dangerous kind. The kind where chandeliers dangled like stars, and every guest looked like they belonged in a magazine spread. Claire had been to her share of high society events, but this was different. This one was personal. This one was war dressed as charity. The ballroom inside the Whitmore house, Delilah's family estate, was all polished marble, gold trim, and music that tried too hard to soothe. Claire entered on Graham's arm, the brush of his fingertips at her waist, anchoring her as camera flashes flicked like static heat. "She's already watching," Graham murmured, his lips near her temple. "I know," Claire said. "Let her." The moment they stepped in fully, Delilah was there, as if she'd been waiting at the gates of some glamorous battleground. "Graham," she greeted, voice honeyed and sharp. "And Claire. My goodness, you clean up beautifully." Claire smiled, the kind of smile that didn't blink. "It must be the lighting." Delilah leaned in, false warmth radiating. "So glad you could make it. Tonight's about honoring legacy. Family, tradition." Her gaze slid to Graham. "All the things we built together." Graham's reply was razor soft. "And all the things we've since redefined," Delilah laughed, turning toward the waiting donors. "Enjoy yourselves. I'll be giving a toast later. You won't want to miss it." As she disappeared into the crowd, Claire's shoulders tensed. "She's planning something," Claire said. "She always is," Graham replied. "But so are we." They moved through the event with ease, speaking with council members, donors, and a few faces Claire recognized from the community board. Graham never strayed far. His hand remained a constant presence, light at her back, grounding her through every sideways glance and polished insult dressed as small talk. But the tension never left her spine. An hour in, the music faded, and the soft clink of glasses signaled attention. Delilah stood beneath the largest chandelier, wine glass raised, her green dress catching the light like sea glass. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice sliding smoothly over the crowd. "Tonight isn't just about giving back. It's about remembering where we came from and who helped build it." Claire felt her stomach tighten. Delilah's gaze swept the room, then landed squarely on Claire. "Sometimes we forget that legacy isn't bought. It's earned. It's nurtured. It's not just about wealth. It's about worth." The room stilled. Even the musicians seemed to pause, breath held between notes. "Some of us," Delilah continued, "choose the path of convenience. We enter into arrangements that look like love but smell like strategy, And while that may be enough to fool some, others know the difference between romance and paperwork." A low murmur rippled across the crowd. Claire didn't flinch. Delilah smiled. "Still, every story deserves its moment. So, let's toast to appearances. May they last just long enough to get what we really want." She raised her glass. Crystal clinked, and just like that, the room exhaled again. Claire stood frozen, not from shock, but from fury. Controlled, measured fury. She set her glass down and stepped forward, not toward Delilah, toward the pianist. "Would you mind?" Claire asked quietly. He nodded, surprised but obliging. She turned to the microphone. The crowd hushed again. "Legacy," Claire said, her voice calm, "isn't just about bloodlines or last names. It's about the impact you leave behind when you're no longer in the room. It's about kindness, choices, integrity, and the way people speak your name when you're not listening." Eyes turned. Whispers rose again. "And while some might confuse structure with strategy," she went on, "I've come to learn that even the most unconventional beginnings can grow into something real, something deeper than contracts, something stronger than envy." She let the pause breathe. "Graham and I didn't meet at a vineyard or during a summer in Italy. We met when both of us had every reason not to trust anyone. But in each other, we found something we didn't expect." She looked directly at Delilah, then, "Peace, fire, choice." Graham stepped up beside her, taking her hand, letting the gesture finish what words couldn't. Claire smiled softly. "So if anyone here still confuses convenience with love, maybe they've never had the real thing." The room held its breath. Then, applause. Soft at first, then rising, genuine and warm. Delilah's expression didn't break, but her eyes did. Claire stepped away from the mic, hand still in Graham's. He didn't say anything until they reached the garden behind the ballroom, the murmurs of the crowd fading behind them. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "I did," Claire answered. "Because I'm not afraid of what this is. Not anymore." Graham turned to her, something unguarded in his eyes. "You're not running?" "No." She looked up at him. "Are you?" He reached up, brushing his thumb along her cheek. "I think I'm done hiding." Claire exhaled. "Then maybe we finally have a beginning." And there, under the stars and the soft hum of distant music, something shifted. Not dramatically, not explosively, but with the quiet certainty of truth stepping into the light. The next morning unfolded slowly, wrapped in a quiet warmth that felt almost borrowed from a different life. Claire stood barefoot on the back veranda, a cup of coffee nestled between her hands, steam curling toward the soft gold of sunrise. The garden stretched before her, lush, untouched, its silence only broken by the hum of cicadas and the distant rustle of leaves. Inside, the house was still asleep. Graham hadn't come downstairs yet. She didn't mind. For the first time in months, maybe years, she didn't feel like she was waiting for someone to define her day. She was just in it. The memory of the night before lingered in pieces. Her voice over the microphone, the crack in Delilah's mask, Graham's hand in hers under the stars. She hadn't planned to say what she said. It hadn't been rehearsed. It had come from the part of her that had been silent for too long. And now, something had shifted. Not just between her and Graham, but within herself. She turned as soft footsteps padded behind her. "You're up early," Graham said, his voice still thick with sleep. Claire smiled without turning around. "Couldn't stay in bed?" "My brain's still buzzing." He came to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "Last night, that speech. You didn't just hold your ground, you owned it." She glanced at him. "I didn't do it for her." "I know." They stood in silence, letting the morning settle around them. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again," Graham said after a pause. "This sense of building something, not out of obligation. Not for legacy, but because it's right." Claire's voice was soft. "Do you mean with me?" He looked at her. "Yes, with you." Her chest tightened. "I meant what I said," she replied. "This isn't about proving anything anymore. Not to them. Not even to us." "Then what's it about now?" Claire turned toward him fully. "It's about choosing this every day, even when it's not perfect. Especially when it's not." Graham reached for her hand. "I want that." She looked down at their fingers. "So do I." Just then, Annie stepped into the doorway behind them, her expression polite but tense. "Mr. Everhart." "Mrs. Everhart." "There's someone here to see you." Graham frowned. "Now?" "She says it's urgent." Claire exchanged a glance with him. "Who is it?" "She wouldn't give a last name." "Just said she used to work with you, Claire." Claire's brows lifted. "Send her in." Moments later, a woman entered the veranda, late 30s, sharp eyes, expensive shoes that didn't quite match the frayed cuffs of her blazer. Her name rose from Claire's memory in an instant. "Erin." Claire stepped forward. "Hi," Erin said, offering a tight smile. "I know." "Surprise. You disappeared. I thought you left the firm for good." "I did. But I've been watching quietly." Graham stepped beside Claire, guarded. Erin continued. "I heard what happened at the gala. That speech is making the rounds, even landed on a legal blog." Claire stiffened. "What do you want, Erin?" "I'm not here to make trouble," she said quickly. "I'm here because someone's trying to." Claire crossed her arms. "Go on." "Delilah." "She's not just embarrassed. She's furious. And she's already working angles to call your marriage into question. Legally, ethically, whatever she can spin." Claire felt Graham tense beside her. "She's meeting with a reporter this week," Erin continued. "The kind who turns rumor into reality. And if she leaks even a whisper of how this all started, how fast the wedding happened, the visa timing, well, people might start asking questions. Unfair ones, but questions nonetheless." Graham's jaw clenched. Why are you telling us? Erin hesitated. Because I've made mistakes. And because I watched you, Claire, at the firm. You played by rules no one else did, and you still won. Claire blinked, trying to steady her pulse. What do you suggest? Get ahead of it. Go public. Tell your story before someone else twists it. On your terms. Silence. The kind that carries weight. Erin pulled a card from her pocket. There's a producer at WSBV News who's interested. A sit-down. Controlled. Respectful. It'll get ahead of the storm. Claire took the card, fingers trembling slightly. Why now? She asked. Why help me now? Erin looked down. Because I spent too many years chasing power I didn't understand. And you turned power into purpose. I guess I want to believe I can still do something that matters. With that, she nodded and left, her footsteps vanishing into the house. Claire stood still. Graham placed a hand gently on her back. What do you want to do? She didn't answer right away. Then she said, Tell the truth. He nodded. Then we do it. Together. She turned to face him fully. Graham, once this goes out, we can't pull it back. The world will know everything. He stepped closer. Then let's give them a story worth remembering. And just like that, the choice was made. Not out of fear, not out of love, but something that would last forever, because it was theirs. The studio lights were softer than Claire expected. Not blinding, not cold, just real. Warm, even. A young assistant clipped a mic to her blouse while another straightened the sleeve of Graham's blazer. Across the small, hushed set, a producer counted down on her fingers. 3, 2, 1. And they were live. Claire sat tall, fingers laced over her knee, eyes trained on the host. Elliot Monroe, Savannah's most respected local anchor, known for his even tone and sharp mind. The cameras weren't what made her nervous. It was the silence before the questions. The pause where truth would be invited or exposed. Elliot leaned in with a reassuring smile. Claire, Graham, thank you both for being here. We know there's been speculation, but I want to start with something simple. How did this all begin? Claire inhaled slowly, letting the moment settle. It began with a contract, she said. An arrangement. Graham needed residency security to continue his business in Savannah. I needed a change, something that didn't feel like running anymore. Elliot blinked, intrigued. So it was a business decision? Graham answered this time. At first, but we were honest about that from the start. What we didn't expect was that something real would begin to grow inside that structure. Claire added, we didn't lie, we just didn't tell the whole story. Because frankly, we were still figuring it out ourselves. The camera light glowed red, indicating a close-up. Claire met it with steady eyes. Elliot's tone softened. What changed? Claire glanced at Graham, then back. Time, intention. We started building a life together. And somewhere between shared breakfast and council meetings and whispered conversations at midnight, it stopped being an arrangement. Graham's voice dropped and started becoming a choice. There was a pause, a weighty one. Elliot nodded slowly. Some people will say it's convenient timing, that you're only coming forward now because someone threatened to do it for you. Claire didn't flinch. They'd be right. Someone did threaten that, but the reason we're here is because I won't let fear dictate my story. Not anymore. Graham leaned forward. We're not trying to sell a fairy tale. We're just telling the truth. Love sometimes doesn't arrive in the expected packaging. But that doesn't make it any less true. Elliot smiled. That's a line someone's going to quote. A chuckle rippled through the crew, but the weight remained. And Claire knew it would, for days, maybe weeks. The interview wrapped 20 minutes later, the final words left echoing like a stamp in the air. Not out of love at first, but built to last. Backstage, Claire peeled the mic from her blouse, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "You were extraordinary," Graham murmured beside her. "I was terrified," she whispered back. He touched her back lightly. That's what made it extraordinary. They walked out into the warm savannah dusk, flashes already starting from a few photographers across the street. A statement had been made. Now the ripple would begin. By the time they got back to the house, Tessa was already waiting on the front porch with 2 glasses of wine and a grin like she'd seen the entire thing 10 seconds after it aired. Claire hugged her tightly. "You burned the house down," Tessa said, holding up a glass, "and built something better in its place." "I don't know if we did it right," Claire admitted. Tessa's smile softened. "There's no right. There's just real." Later that evening, Claire stood alone in her closet, peeling off the blouse, stepping out of her heels, the adrenaline finally crashing. She caught her reflection in the mirror, tired, yes, but clear. A knock at the doorway. Graham stood there, jacket off, sleeves rolled. "Come here," he said gently. She crossed to him without a word. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her in tight. They stood like that for a long time. No words, no rush. Eventually, she looked up. "We'll get backlash. I know. Some people won't believe us. Then let them. And what if this gets harder?" He kissed her temple. "Then we do the hard things." Claire rested her head against his chest. "I never meant to fall into this." He smiled against her hair. "Neither did I. But here we are." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. "I meant it, you know, on the interview." "I know," he said. "So did I." Claire's fingers slipped into his. "Then let's keep telling it. Not just for them. For us." He nodded. Every day. And in the hush of that ordinary evening, no ballrooms, no lights, no watching eyes, something extraordinary settled into place, not loud but permanent. The Sunday after the interview aired, Savannah felt different. Not the sky, not the air, not even the streets, but the energy. Claire noticed it the moment they stepped into the bakery near Forsyth Park. People looked up, not with judgment, but with quiet familiarity. Some smiled. Some nodded. One woman, silver-haired with a child tugging at her arm, simply whispered, "Thank you," as she passed. Claire met Graham's eyes across the pastry counter. He raised an eyebrow. "I think you've become local royalty," he said under his breath. She shook her head, laughing. "I think we became something people didn't know they needed." They found a small table in the corner, croissants between them, 2 lattes cooling in porcelain cups. Outside, the Spanish moss moved with the breeze like ribbon in slow motion. "I got a call this morning," Claire said, brushing crumbs from her lap. "From Councilman Reyes." Graham set down his cup. "Good or bad?" "Good. He wants to propose a long-term public-private housing initiative. He said our story shifted the way the board is thinking about partnerships." Graham smiled. "They see you now." Claire paused. "They see us now." Before he could respond, a voice cut through the background chatter. "Well, isn't this picture perfect?" They both turned. Delilah stood at the counter, sunglasses perched on her head, that same calculated confidence on her face. But something had shifted in her, too. She wasn't performing anymore. She wasn't hiding behind an audience. She was just there. "Delilah," Claire said coolly. Graham stayed still, quiet. "I wasn't going to say anything," Delilah said, stepping closer. "But then I saw you sitting here and I figured one last conversation wouldn't hurt." Claire gestured toward the empty chair. "Sit, if you want to say something." Delilah remained standing. "You know, I hated you." At first, Claire met her gaze without flinching. "I know. But now I realize," she said slowly, "I didn't hate you. I hated that you reminded me of the version of myself I buried." Silence fell between them, not awkward, but thick. Claire leaned forward slightly. "And what version was that?" "The one that believed love didn't need power to be real," Delilah answered. Claire nodded once. "It doesn't." Delilah's smile was brittle. "Maybe not for you, but for me, it's always been a currency." She glanced at Graham. "You chose her, and I thought I was angry about that, but really, I was angry because you didn't choose me even when you could have, before." Graham's voice was calm, steady. "I didn't know who I was back then." "And now?" Delilah asked, a hint of something, regret, in her voice. "Now I know love isn't about winning," he said. "It's about staying, even when no one's watching." Delilah stood a moment longer, then nodded. "Goodbye, Graham." She turned to Claire. "And you didn't beat me. You just outgrew the game." Claire didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Delilah left the bakery, the bell over the door jingling once, soft and final. Graham exhaled slowly. "That felt like the last page of a book I didn't finish reading." Claire reached for his hand. "It was never your story to finish." They sat quietly again, the rest of the morning spilling around them like golden light. Later that afternoon, back at the house, Claire stood in the garden barefoot, the grass damp from morning dew, the air warm but forgiving. She was holding the deed to the small property she and Graham had visited weeks earlier, a vacant lot near the edge of town where the community housing project would start. "It's happening," she whispered. Behind her, Graham wrapped his arms around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "You made it happen." "We did," she corrected. He pressed a kiss to her cheek. "Do you ever think about how strange this all is? All the time. How we started?" Claire turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I used to wonder if we could survive how we started. But now, I think how we started is exactly why we understand what we have." Graham cupped her face gently. "Then let's build something real, brick by brick, day by day." Claire nodded. "No contracts, no expectations. Just us," he said. "And the future," she added. A beat. "Do you regret anything?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "Only that I didn't see it sooner." Graham smiled. "Then we're right on time." And as they stood there, wrapped in silence and sunlight, the past finally settled where it belonged. Behind them, the future. It was theirs to build, not rushed, not borrowed, but earned. The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and golden, the kind of day that felt like it had been carved out of hope itself. Claire stood in front of the mirror in the Everhart guest room, now her dressing room, barefoot, wrapped in a silk robe, her hair pinned in soft waves. No veil, no lace, just her present, ready. This time there was no hush of nerves clawing at her ribs. No contracts folded neatly in an envelope, no pretending. This was not a performance. It was a promise. Tessa leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a wistful smile tugging at her lips. You always were the one who needed the hardest road to believe something was real. Claire laughed under her breath. I didn't think I needed anyone to believe in me. You didn't, Tessa said. You just needed someone who didn't run when things got complicated. Claire turned from the mirror, her voice barely a whisper. He stayed. And you let him, Tessa said softly. That was the hardest part, wasn't it? Claire nodded once. Outside, the garden had been transformed. No orchestra, no grand arch. Just rows of wooden chairs set beneath a canopy of oak trees dripping with Spanish moss. Woven lanterns swung gently above, catching the afternoon light, like fireflies paused mid-flight. Guests filled the seats slowly, friends from the legal world, neighbors, council members, even Judge Ellis in his Sunday suit, cane in hand, and a knowing smile beneath his silver mustache. At the front of it all stood Graham, hands folded, his expression somewhere between reverent and awestruck. Claire stepped through the French doors and onto the stone path that led down into the garden. She wore a soft ivory gown, no embellishments, no excess. Just simplicity, grace, strength. Every step felt like closing a chapter and opening another. When she reached him, he didn't speak right away. His eyes roamed her face like he was memorizing her all over again. You came, he said quietly. She smiled, voice catching. I never left. Rick stood between them, beaming with pride. He wasn't a minister, but he was family. And today, that mattered more. No readings, Claire had told him the night before. Just words that mean something. So he began. Today isn't about the beginning of love, Rick said. It's about the choice to stay in it, through silence, through doubt, through the days that don't glitter. It's about waking up and saying, still you. Claire's throat burned. Graham reached for her hand, grounding her. Claire and Graham didn't meet in the usual way, Rick continued. But maybe that's the point. Love doesn't always walk in through the front door. Sometimes it shows up as a question, sometimes as a contract, and sometimes as an interruption. There was a soft wave of laughter. Even Claire chuckled through her tears. But it becomes real, Rick said, when you choose it over and over. And that's what today is, not a ceremony. A decision. Graham turned to Claire. Can I go first? She nodded. His voice was quiet. Raw. I came to Savannah to protect what I built, to hold on to a life I thought I understood. And then you walked in, like a storm that didn't ask permission. You challenged everything. You unraveled the walls I thought kept me safe. And instead of running, you stayed. Not out of obligation, not out of strategy. But something braver than that. His eyes didn't leave hers. I don't need a vow to tell you I love you, but I'll give you one anyway. I will never stop choosing you. Even on the days you don't choose yourself. Claire's breath hitched. She steadied it with a laugh, full of everything she hadn't said until now. When I agreed to marry you, she said, voice shaking, I thought I was trading my heart for safety. I thought I was giving something up. But what I didn't know was that I was stepping into something bigger, something real. Because with you, I didn't have to perform. I could just be. Tears welled in her eyes. I used to think love meant compromise. Now I know it means honesty, softness, staying even when it's uncomfortable. And I vow to keep doing that. For you. For us. Rick looked between them, then smiled. Then, by the power vested in me by absolutely no legal institution, I now pronounce you already married. But more importantly, deeply, freely, and joyfully in love. Graham pulled her close and kissed her, not for show, not for cameras, but because there was nowhere else in the world he needed to be. The garden erupted into applause, but for a moment, it all faded. Just him. Just her. Later, at the small reception beneath the same canopy, Claire leaned against Graham's shoulder, heels kicked off in the grass. "Do you ever think about how it might have gone differently?" she asked. Graham tilted his head. "You mean if we never signed the contract?" "No. I mean if we had fallen in love the way people expect." Naturally, effortlessly. He thought for a moment. "No. Because the way we did it, it wasn't easy. But it was true. We earned every moment." She nodded slowly. "It's the most beautiful love story I never saw coming." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "That's because you were looking in all the wrong places." Claire laughed, eyes wet, heart full. And as dusk crept in, lanterns glowing above them, and music drifting through the warm air, Claire understood something she hadn't before. Love wasn't about the beginning. It was about what you built after. Not out of love at first, but something better. Something that would last forever. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way.